Many of us watched with concern and horror at the events that took place last week as a violent mob attacked the Capitol, the seat of American democracy. And so even now, as we're just not so far from the inauguration that will take place, there's mounting concerns about violence and both in our nation's capital and across the country. So we're gathered here today with some of the Jewish spiritual leaders across the country that we thought could speak to us and share with us some words of wisdom to help us manage these concerns, right? Maybe not to fix them, but to help us deal with some of the maybe emotions that are coming up and our concerns. So thank you everyone for joining us both here on Zoom and on Facebook. And I'm going to start by introducing our panelists. We have 4 rabbis with us today. And then after I finish introducing them, we'll ask each of the panelists to speak for a few minutes, giving us some words of wisdom for us. And then there will be opportunities for questions. So the chat box is open for you to write to me and with your questions when we get to that. And also if you're watching on Facebook, you can put your questions in there as well. And we are watching that feed and they will also get to me. So I will start with Rabbi Arthur Waskow. Hi, Rabbi Waskow, you want to say hello?
Hi, shalom.
Shalom. So Rabbi Arthur Waskow is a lifelong Jewish activist and the founder of the Shalom Center in Philadelphia, which seeks to unify political action with Jewish spirituality. And he is the author of more than 24 books, including most recently, Dancing in God's Earthquake, The Coming Transformation of Religion. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. And that's one of the earthquakes. There have been at least half a dozen in the last 6 months. What happened last Wednesday or was. So I actually want to begin, we're taught to begin as we seek wisdom and try to say words of wisdom with a blessing, a bracha. So I wanted to do that, including everybody who speaks and those who are listening with their hearts open. Baruch atah Yah, Eloheinu ruach haolam. Blessed is the interbreathing spirit of the world, the breath of life, who gives us the power to use our breath to speak words, even over these long distances by means of almost magic technology, and who teaches us that what we speak should inspire us to act mitzvot, to act with mitzvot, acts of holy consequence, and teaches us to elevate the breath that we use to know that it's the breath that connects all life on the planet. It is echad, it is one. And the community, those of us muted and those of us not, are welcome to say Amen.
Amen.
So the additional words of wisdom to follow the blessing that we will get by hearing each other. I think we face 2 questions now. One is how to address our own modern Pharaoh and how to address those who have been supporting him. And what I think the great, extraordinary, great story of the Exodus is a brilliant analysis of what power run amok does. And it seems to me that our own Pharaoh of this generation in America read everything of the book of Exodus till the last paragraph of the story of the Pharaoh. He didn't read the piece about ending up in the Red Sea or the Sea of Reeds. And it comes because Pharaoh, the old one and the new one, were addicted to their own power. And from step to step, plague to plague, kept first being scared and then saying, no, no, I'm going to go on. You can't go free. You can't go have a 3-day festival, nothing doing. And each time until the death of the firstborn, once the plague had stopped, the Pharaoh said, oh, wow, stuff happens, it's just an accident. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam knew it wasn't just an accident, it was the interweaving of human life and what we call natural life, other forms of life, that had brought about those plagues. Finally, Pharaoh says, after the death of the firstborn, Pharaoh says, go already, get out of here. You're driving me crazy and you're ruining my country. He doesn't realize that he's the one who's doing the ruining. And he says, go. And for a moment, it seems as if he's given in, but the addiction takes over again. He is too hungry to assert his power. He can't bear being a loser. So he organizes his horse chariot militia and chases them to the Red Sea. And that's where he ends, in the Red Sea. And that's what we've seen happen last week. And his power is collapsing all around him, as it did to the ancient Pharaoh. So our job is to finish that, and I think the attempts at impeachment and conviction will at least attempt to do that. The other question is, the Capitol is not really the seat of American democracy. The seat of American democracy is in the neighborhoods all over America. And that's where we need to turn our attention. The most urgent, though people don't treat it as the most urgent yet, but the actual most urgent crisis and earthquake of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 that we're facing is the one with Earth, the one where plagues, not only the coronavirus, but other plagues, fires, famines, floods, are haunting us and endangering us deeply, deeply. And there, I think, what needs to happen is a national commitment to support in every neighborhood, including those who continue to vote for Pharaoh. In every neighborhood, support, financial support for co-ops of solar and wind energy, drawing on the New Deal's history of the rural electrification campaign. We don't even realize that in 1930, most American farms didn't even have electricity. That's astounding. And the government took action to make sure that everybody did. What they need to do now is to make sure that everybody has full access to renewable sources of electricity. So, Dibarti, I've spoken, that's my words, and I will wait and love to hear the efforts at wisdom that other people have, as well as my effort at wisdom. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Waskow, for your powerful words. I'm going now to ask Rabbi Emily Cohen to offer us some words of wisdom and to introduce Rabbi Cohen. She is the spiritual leader at West End Synagogue in New York City and a 2018 graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. Prior to joining West End last summer, Rabbi Emily served for 2 years as Lab Shul's Jewish Emergent Network Rabbinic Resident. And off the pulpit, Rabbi Emily produces and hosts the podcast Jew 2, Tales of the Mixed Multitude, and enjoys writing for Jewish publications such as Alma. Also, she composes Jewish music and lives in Brooklyn, but tweets wherever you are at that Rabbi Cohen. So Rabbi Cohen, I'll turn it to you now.
Thank you so much. I want to begin just by saying that I am still very surprised that I have been asked to be on a panel with rabbis that I look up to. So truly, it's a deep honor and privilege to be able to share what wisdom I've gleaned with this giant community of people and also with these three rabbis that I look up to. So I want to begin with a quote from another rabbi that I have to credit my congregant Mel Skolt for sending my way. The rulers in a mobocracy, know that they can gain control of the masses by instilling in them hates and fears of some common enemy who has to be augmented to gigantic proportions if he is comparatively insignificant and harmless, and who has to be invented if he is non-existent. For their purposes, mankind must be treated as broken up into classes or nations or tribes that are engaged in a mutual life and death struggle. The purpose of propaganda is to fan the flames of hate. That could have been written this week, but it was written by Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan in 1939. And so the wisdom that I am saddened to need to bring to this moment is that in some ways we haven't yet learned, and we are dealing with some of the same sorts of cycles that we've been dealing with certainly for the last century and for eons before that. But the other piece of wisdom that I want to bring is that this insurrection occurred the week that we began the book of Exodus, which is a moment where the Jewish people is at one of its worst points. We have gone from being on top of society, whether we got there in a nice way or not is a different conversation for a different time, but we've gone from having all of this power to being enslaved. And it seems like there's no way to get out of it. And yet, we know that we'll get out of it. We know that it's possible to go from this lowest point of feeling like there's no way up to going where Rabbi Waskow led us into the Sea of Reeds and then onwards to this wandering into this promised land. And so the wisdom that I need to offer to us today is that if you feel hopeless, if you feel rageful, if you feel like there's no next step to take, we've been there before. We've been in the place of nowhere to turn before. But we have turned, and we've seen the burning bush, and we've listened to its call, and we've made our way out. So I don't want anybody to try to calm themselves in this moment, but I want everybody to notice what you're feeling, and from that place of noticing, be able to take step by step the journey from being at the bottom to being at sea level again, and to eventually rising together to a place of connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rabbi Cohen. I'll ask now Rabbi Asher Lopatin to share some words. Rabbi Lopatin is the spiritual leader of Kehilat Etz Chaim in Detroit, Michigan. He's also the founder and director of the Detroit Center for Civil Discourse, which works to nurture deep relationships between people with diverse views through dialogue. He was previously the president of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, a modern Orthodox rabbinical school in New York City, and Rabbi Lopatin received rabbinical ordination from Yeshiva University and Yeshiva Sbrisk, did I say that right, in Chicago.
Thank you so much, Julie. And like Rabbi Cohen said, I am so honored to be on this panel with rabbis that I respect. And it's such an intergenerational group of rabbis, so which is wonderful, which is very special. I was blessed just last night to be able to learn with a group of African-American clergy. It's actually a national group of Jews and African-Americans learning Bible together. I think it was started by Rabbi J. Rosenbaum in Seattle, and we had Atlanta on, and Chicago and Seattle and Detroit. And through my work, I'm now also the executive director of the Jewish Community Relations Council and the AJC in Detroit. It was fascinating to read the biblical texts of Moses and the Israelites and slavery, with my Black brothers and sisters, and then taking that to viewing how do you view what happened in Washington and all over the country, and it's certainly happened in Michigan and Lansing. And how do we view that? And one of the things that I was taught there in this group is, and Rabbi Cohen touched on it beautifully also, not being afraid and not being despondent, and making sure that as difficult as things are and as frustrating as they are these 70 million, 75 million voters who voted for Donald Trump, are they going to listen to us? Are we going to make a difference? Are they going to be able to hear truth and reason and morality and ethics and justice? And from my Jewish perspective, and I do realize that Jews have a lot of privilege now. Thank God. Thank God we have a Jewish senator from Georgia, and we have a Jewish second, the vice president's, Kamala's husband is Jewish, and they're all over. Thank God. From my perspective, I could say, let's not be afraid. Let's know that we can make a difference. That just as Moshe was so scared and said, you know, the Jews don't listen to me, how is Pharaoh going to listen to me? In our Jewish community also, we know that a lot of Jews are not in the right place right now. And we have to say to ourselves not to fear. As God said, we can make a difference. From the Christian perspective, and this is something new that I learned, turn the other cheek, which we hear about frequently, as Jesus said, is not about being afraid. It's not about being despondent. It's really the opposite, is when you are powerless, rather than hanging your head low and just going along. If someone smacks you, you stand up to them. You don't have the power to fight them necessarily, but you have the power to say, I'm a dignified human being. You smacked me here. I'm going to stay in my position. You'll have to smack my other cheek, but I am going to stand my ground. And so the first feeling that I had so much was this sadness that there's so much fear. There's fear maybe on our part, and I hope there isn't, that we can make a difference. And the sad fear on the side of so many that are catering to their base. Some of it is blind ambition. Some of the leaders of the fraud movement, of these other movements that spread terrible lies over the last few weeks since the election, some are blindly ambitious. But many are afraid, and they're afraid of the base. They're afraid of Trump. They're afraid of all sorts of things. And we have to fight that fear. So we have to fight that fear within ourselves of, what can I do? Yes, we can do something. And also, we have to stand up to the fear that others feel around them and feel that fear also. I just want to make one more comment, and that's that it was interesting. There's so much anger and righteous indignation, and we should be angry. We also have to remember Martin Luther King, who talked about love, and that when he fought his enemies, and when he fought those that tried to destroy him and kill him and stop him, both in the South and even worse when he got to Chicago, actually, always countering them with love. And somehow, and I think maybe the Jewish people are in a better place now to say this, because we are looking at some of these battles as partners, as allies with our brothers and sisters in the Black community and in other communities. We're fighting this within the community of justice and truth, but we have a lot of privileges. In some ways, we have the ability to carry that Martin Luther King idea of love, of fighting with love. And I hope that we can somehow find that love, those that we have to stand up to, that want to take away our democracy and justice and want to bring this country backwards. We can stand up to them. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. and we stand up to them with love as well, love in our hearts for them. And the more they want to fight us and demonize us and spread vicious anti-Semitism and racism, the more we fight them with love in our hearts and with expressions of love as well. So I hope we can balance that. And through that, I get some comfort. I get some comfort of strength, and I get comfort that comes with the sense that we can still fight even, and we can still love at the same time.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi Lopatin. We have one more panelist, one more rabbi. This is Rabbi Rachel Isaacs. And before I introduce you, I'll just remind everyone that after this, we will have the opportunity to ask our own questions or ask some of the panelists to address a comment that we had. If you're on Zoom, you can direct that in the chat to me. And if you're on Facebook, you can put it in the comment box, and that will get to me as well. So Rabbi Rachel Isaacs, welcome. Thank you also for being here. Rabbi Rachel Isaacs was named one of America's most inspiring rabbis in 2014 by the Jewish Daily Forward. And she is the executive director of the Center for Small Town Jewish Life at Colby College in Maine, and also the spiritual leader of Beth Israel Congregation. Rabbi Isaacs is the inaugural holder of the Dorothy Bibi Levine Alfond Chair in Jewish Studies and teaches courses on Hebrew, Jewish theology, and Jewish humor. In 2016, she delivered the final Hanukkah benediction of the Obama administration at the White House. So thank you for being with us, Rabbi Isaacs.
So thank you so much. It's wonderful to greet everyone virtually from Waterville, Maine. And it's an honor to be here with such beloved colleagues. So what I want to do in the time that I'm sharing my wisdom is that we've heard so many clear and beautiful prophetic voices from my colleagues about the nature of what we're facing, the danger, and also the opportunity. What I want to offer in my time with all of you is a more pastoral perspective about how the Jewish tradition can give us the strength and the resilience to make it through. Because what I've noticed from colleagues and students, I work with a multi-generational, multiracial, multi-faith context every day in rural Maine, is that people are so despondent right now and so scared that what I hear is, you know, I'm not leaving the house. I feel sick. I don't know what to do. That this trauma that we have all encountered is really affecting all of us. And as a result, not only do we have a responsibility to care for ourselves and our own well-being, but if we want to be constructive actors in building a new America, we need to be able at least sometimes to find our center, to find some kind of peace and solace to keep on going. And so I want to talk a little bit about those voices in our tradition. My journey through rabbinical school was rich and fabulous in many ways and difficult in others because of the role that I played in the history of the conservative movement. And the pasuk that I put when I was ordained was Psalm 147:3, Harofei lishvorei lev umechabesh la'atvotam. So God heals their broken hearts, or our broken hearts, and binds up our wounds. And I think, you know, we can look to many places. We can go to Twitter and Facebook and TV, and insofar as we're engaging with our neighbors, we can find many places for outrage or for things that will make us scared. And one of the gifts of being a person of faith, one of the beautiful things about coming from a religious civilization is that we have in the wellspring of our wisdom this idea of a God that is capable of healing us and binding up our wounds so that we can get back in the ring. Or even if we're not ready to go back in the ring for a while, but that there is a source for healing and for comfort in the God with whom we are connected through an eternal covenant. And so when the human world doesn't give us what we need, when in fact it's breaking our hearts to the point that we think we can't get back up again, there is a God that can actually heal a broken heart, or at least stitch it back together after it's been ripped, so that it our hearts should never be the same. We've encountered really a mini death, a trauma, but that God has the ability to stitch us back together again. And we need to maintain that faith if we are going to remain or retain the ability to be constructive actors in our communities and in our world. And especially, you know, I'm talking to all of you from a very politically mixed rural area. You know, my colleagues, my neighbors, my congregants, I'm surrounded by people who don't see the world the way that I do. And the things that I take for granted are not the things that they take back for granted. And so when I think, how can I stitch back up these relationships? How can I stay connected to people who see the world so differently than I do? I have to turn to my faith. I have to turn to God. Otherwise, I think I'd be totally hopeless, right? So I'm thankful for that, God. And the other piece of wisdom that I want to bring is that, you know, in liberal Jewish communities, I think that there is a real ambivalence towards our approach to the Sabbath and to holidays. And all the more so with the coronavirus. You know, if we want to have Jewish engagement, so much of us are turning to our phones and our computer screens. And even if we're online for shul, we might see that breaking news update, or we might see that email, or we might see that tweet. And so there isn't a break for our minds or our souls from the brokenness of the world. And I'm deeply grateful. I just happen to be blessed that I'm the mother of 2 small children that hate my phone and hate the computer, that just want me to shut it off, that demand, that crave my eye contact and my engagement. And the time that they get the most of that is on Shabbat, when it's all off. We up in Waterville, we do a little bit on Zoom on Friday nights, but we do all our Saturday morning davening on hiking trails. And I'm really grateful for that, because on Saturdays, the kids know they don't need to fight for my attention. And God knows that God doesn't need to fight for my attention, that the brokenness of the world will be there at the end of Chag or at the end of Shabbos. We need to have the ability to look people in the eyes and be engaged in a world that extends beyond a distorted political reality that is designed to keep us enraged, that is designed to keep us polarized for the profit of a few individuals at the expense of our country. And so Shabbos is really the greatest gift, I think, to remember what it is to make that eye contact, and to remember politics are important. We need to stay informed. We have a civic obligation, but there is a world, there's a human world beyond political conflict, that our relationships are multifaceted and complex. And if we have the ability and the resilience to stay in relationship with people who see the world differently than we do, then that's how we have the leverage to actually engage in the work of persuasion and change. So let us look to our tradition to sort of see the off-ramp of going down an endless rabbit hole of doom scrolling and of deepening hatred. We need to find a way to come back to one another and to God, even if it's just one day a week, to remember there is more than this. And beyond that Rubicon is God and the image of God in everyone that we encounter.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Isaacs, for your beautiful words, and thank you to all the panelists. Before I ask some of the questions that we have here, I wanted to know if there was anything that one of the other rabbis said that any of you would like to respond to.
I think lifting up love is absolutely right. I would like the love to carry material energy, you might say. I think renewable energy is loving and lovable energy, and it needs to be made available to the neighborhoods, whether they're North Philadelphia in despair or rural Arkansas in despair, neighborhoods that think they're each other's enemies. They're both in despair, and the renewable energy is one way to lift us all up out of that despair, and the earth as well.
Yeah. And I would just want to reflect, Rabbi Waskow, with the idea of energy, that love And love is a renewable energy, is a source of energy within us. And it doesn't mean passivity. I hope, I'm a director of a nonpartisan organization, but I hope that Biden runs with all these initiatives, and thank God there's that slim majority, and moves forward. Love should not slow us down from our moral obligations. It should give us energy to do more. And, you know, when we, if we can't have that love, that's what really could slow us down. Bitterness, anger, the beautiful Rabbi Isaacs was talking about, of that rabbit hole of you know, being stuck in our own world. No, use that love to strengthen yourself and to do more. If you have to fight, fight with love, whoever you have to fight. But that love is a resource. That love is an energy. And hopefully we can really spread that.
Okay, so I think I'll turn to one question. Actually, there were a few questions on this same topic. People are having, or a few people in the chat, are having a hard time with this idea of love and responding to love, you know, to someone who is at the extreme. One of the comments said, how can I respond with love to a Nazi? Or how can I respond with love to someone, you know, to someone who is calling for destruction and violence and death? So does someone, maybe Rabbi Isaacs, or does someone want to take that question?
So I would just say, I don't think we have an obligation to show love to every human being, right? If we love everyone, we love no one. I actually think that love in the political sphere is very different than love in the personal sphere. But, you know, I do think that love comes at a cost. So while I do think that it's important that the worst behaviors of our adversaries don't define how we engage in the world, I'm going to be a little bit more selective with how I use the word love. I do think we need to recognize the divine image in every human being, because I think that's at the core of our faith. And the other piece that I would say, again, there are very few politically mixed communities left in the United States anymore, but I happen to live in one of them, which makes my work unusual. And I stay in close contact with many of the white evangelical pastors that are in my area. And we do not share the same politics, but we are very much in relationship with each other. We check in with each other. We maintain those relationships. Not everybody who voted for Trump is a Nazi. That's just not true. I think that there is a spectrum of political beliefs in both parties. And I think that if you choose not to be in relationship or show integrity or respect to anybody unless they share your exact political points of view, you're rendering yourself irrelevant in the healing of this country. Now, some people don't want to be involved in healing, and some people think that you're trying to cover up injustice if you talk about healing before tshuva has been done. But what I witness is that some of my evangelical colleagues are struggling. They're struggling deeply to make sense of the world. They're disturbed by what they see. They're trying to understand the right thing to do. And they're not as certain as I think a lot of our media makes them out to be. And so, you know, I don't think you need to love everybody. And I think that if you don't feel the ability to engage with people who disagree with you, that's fine. But I think for those of us who can, or who feel that that's part of our mission, I still think that that's important, not to give up on what we think is right or move the ball forward with our moral convictions, to Rabbi Lopatin's point, but that we need to stay in conversation. Because personally, for me, I'm not willing to cut 50% of my town out of my life, and I'm not willing to cut 50% of this country out of the sphere of my discourse and the world of teaching my Torah. And I know that not everybody feels that way, but that's where I stand right now in Waterville.
I would have said that feeling of yours about not cutting them out is love. So, all right.
I would say that for me, that the love piece is more about internal than external. If somebody wearing a Camp Auschwitz shirt comes up to me, I'm not going to want to give that person a hug. But my engagement with them is going to be based on my love for the possibility of a world where that hatred does not exist, and where people feel seen and they feel like there is enough, groundwork for connection, that there's no need for that. I don't think, I agree with Rabbi Isaacs that universal love can't really go beyond, for me, but Tselem Elohim, the idea that we're all made in the divine image, because I agree that love is something that is for particular kinds of relationships. But I think that when I do spend quite a bit of time on Twitter, and I think that the love there is like, why am I posting what I'm posting, or why am I engaging in the way that I'm engaging there? Because there's plenty of people that come at it from a place of, rage, not for the sake of heaven. And then there are people that come at it from more of a place of like, this is truth that must be told. And I think that that's a form of love, truth telling in the face of violence, truth telling in the face of risk. That's a form of love. And just, making sure that you don't let the anger of the world take over your own well-being. In my senior Torah a few years ago, I spoke about how it's kind of the job of each person to become a burning bush, by which I mean you need to shine bright and you need to draw attention to what's going on in the world, but you have to figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't consume you. The burning bush is an embodiment of love, and fire is something that takes all your energy away. So if you can figure out how to be on fire without burning, that to me is what this sort of love is that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think Rabbi Cohen nailed it beautifully. I remember, I'm an old timer. I remember Richard Nixon's, to bring back some nostalgia, his departure speech. He talked about this, that, people can hate you, but if you hate them, you've lost. But for internally, and I would recommend people watch the show Tehran, which is so interesting. We're fighting this enemy, Iran. Israel is fighting it. And yet this show is bold enough to make the characters real people that are concerned for their spouses who have cancer and something like that. So it's interesting. I'll make one more controversial comment, and then I know that Gandhi talked about, like, why isn't there more just passive resistance to the Nazis? And, what do you mean passive resistance? If you want to kill us and gas us and shoot us and, destroy us. But the two protests that occurred in Germany, one was for non-Jewish wives of Jewish men in Berlin. When they protested, the Nazi government yielded to them and did not arrest. They let out their Jewish husbands, and they did not murder them. And the T4 program, which was a euthanasia program of Germans, I don't know how to use that word, but Germans killing people who had physical or mental disabilities. When the Catholic Church and people finally protested that, they basically stopped it or it went underground. So it's fascinating that even the Nazis, when there is someone standing up and saying, stop it, it was effective. Now, again, I don't know if that would have worked at all to stop the 6 million Jews being murdered, but it's something to think about, that at the very least, if we just stand up and voice our opinions, whether it's with love or without love, whatever it is, we have a huge amount of strength to confront even the most vile enemies.
We have a comment in the chat box that I was hoping one or more of you could address. So someone says, I don't know, the entire situation really triggered some intergenerational trauma. I went and got valuables out in case we needed to flee with them. We Jews know from not being connected to a country, even if we've lived there for generations. I just want to get the hell out of the US. I'm not sure we are in a place that can be healed. Comments?
I think that this is a really important comment, and I want to honor it because I think that for members of the American Jewish community that are Holocaust survivors or the descendants of survivors that escaped oppressive regimes, I can see how what happened on January 6th could really trigger that trauma. and say, you know what, maybe America can be healed, maybe it can't, but I'm not going to be here to see if it can be or not, because I want to survive. And I think that it's okay. And I think we sort of need to hold that up, that you might be right. We don't know. We don't know if America can be healed. None of us know. Nobody knows what the future holds. And I do think that, to be perfectly honest, like, I am thankful that there is a country for us that we potentially could go to with all the problematics there involved, that some of us could find refuge in that country. At the same time, I think, again, this is where the place of faith is. None of us know for sure that America can be healed or can come back to a better place. None of us know that in a factual way. What I do know is that if we don't try and we don't have the faith to envision a world that is better, if we don't believe that it can be better and that we have the power to effectively address evil, it won't get better. And so there are going to be a multiplicity of Jewish responses to this moment. For some, it will be fleeing. For some, it will be fighting, right? There are going to be many legitimate responses based on the trauma that we carry to this moment. For me personally, and I can only speak personally, and I would feel very wrong saying that everybody should feel the way that I do, is that at least for now, I'm going to try and engage in the work of repair here.
Did anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, I would. 2 years ago, when one of my grandchildren was looking at various colleges, I said to the correct adjective in this case, not adjective, pronoun in this case is them, child who grew up and has chosen a non-binary definition of gender. I said, have you thought about McGill College outside the United States? You're, after all, one of the more vulnerable people. They looked at me and said, I'm not leaving. I can't even say it without crying. Jews often have fled. I think America has had such a history of healing, never enough, but always some, that I think the challenge to stay and struggle is a valuable one. I don't criticize people. I mean, I felt the urge myself. I wouldn't have asked the question if I had felt the urge myself. But the answer, I thought, was a strong and vital and very Jewish, maybe newly Jewish answer.
If I can add a little bit to that, with gratitude for your presence and your tears. I think we haven't been crying enough, Rabbi Waskow, and so I'm grateful that you are. I've had trouble doing it recently. This is my home, and I don't have a place to run away to. Because I'm in a family that I think is a modern Jewish family that therefore has many people who would not have safe haven anywhere in particular. And so for me, the only choice, I mean, even if I could go somewhere, I can't leave my people. And so for me, the only choice is to be present and to sit with my fear, to know where my passport is, but not even to know how I would use it, and to do what I can to engage in the work of healing and to engage in the work of, self-care, not in the, modern way that we use it of like, I'm going to do yoga, but in the way of saying to I do yoga, I'm not making fun of yoga, but like in the way of saying, like, really settling into that grounding breath, doubling down, as Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg likes to say, on your spiritual practice, and truly saying, this is where we are. We have been in similar situations before. We don't know how this one's going to turn out. And yet the only way to move is forward.
it's just so sad also that on Wednesday, when we found out the results of the Georgia elections, a runoff, where a Black man and a Jewish man were elected senators from Georgia, that then this horrific riot, mob scene, insurrection happened. And so at the same time, when you have these scary anti-Semitism, racism, everything, mobism, as mentioned, at the same time, you have what an incredible country where Georgia produces that. And again, where the vice president gives a Hanukkah message and from her family and lights the candles. And, so America is so amazing. And I just want to reflect that, but let's not give up on the amazing things that are happening, that people who are so downtrodden or hated are really able to come into their own now in America, as should be in our country.
Thank you all. We have one more question in the chat box, which is, how do I deal with the heartbreak and grief that I feel without becoming incapacitated? That is, how do I honor that grief without just, completely either withdrawing or losing it?
I can jump in on that. Part of what helps me deal with the heartbreak, and I do have a lot of it, as I think all of us do, is to note where I have power. I, like everybody else who's Jewish, suffer from anti-Semitism, but I also benefit from white privilege. I benefit from cis privilege. I am queer, but I often pass as straight. And like that, because of that, there are ways that I can walk in the world where I have more power and more ability to change things. And so I try to combat the heartbreak with the knowledge that I can do a little thing here and there to try to make it better, to use my voice to lift up other things, to use my finances. I'm also very privileged that I have not been financially impacted by this pandemic, which is such a huge thing. So, just last night, a friend of mine who lives in a different state posted that they have a neighbor who is really having trouble, and they've been helping this person personally, but their resources are getting tapped out. And they asked if folks might be willing to donate on a monthly basis to help this one person do okay in this time. And I just said yes. When I am lucky enough to be in a situation where I am financially stable, to offer a little bit of money every month in that way is a way that I can combat the heartache. To write a piece that, shines a little light on what's going on, combats the heartache. And it doesn't make it better. It's just a reminder that sitting still won't fix anything, but moving can.
Something that I just want to offer is that I believe very strongly in a God that doesn't want me to suffer. I don't think that God derives any pleasure or joy from my suffering. I don't think that that's why God put me on this earth. And, something that I come back to time and time again is Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, like worship God with joy, right? And so we need to work finding joy, whether we're in the aftermath of January 6th or even before then, right? I mean, it is hard work to focus on the things that are positive in this world. It is much easier to give into despair. It is much easier to mourn than to set up space and time for joyousness. It takes more work. It takes more effort. It always does. And so I think it's important to express your grief, to cry, to be honest about it, to let yourself feel it and let it out. I think Rabbi Waskow, I respect you so much for just being there and expressing that. And then be at a certain point, you reach a moment where you're just sort of okay, I felt it. And now I want to be with a God that created me to experience joy in this world. And part of that is focusing on the positive, and there is still positive, whether it's the election in Georgia or, the times in which I know that through difficult conversations and relationships, I've changed people's minds and grown closer to them. With people that I never thought it was possible. But those are actually my proudest moments as a rabbi and a Jew, not when, I represented and made everybody who already agreed with me feel good, right? That's actually the moments I'm proudest of as a rabbi, even though they were rough at the time. So part of being in Jewish community is creating space for joy in the darkest moments, and that when we do that, we are fulfilling the purpose that God created us for on this earth. Yes, to fulfill mitzvot, but to do so with joy.
And I would say also that in our tradition, grieving comes with coming together with community, whether it's a Shiva, whether it's the Kaddish that requires you to be with community. And, you know, I think this one of the saddest moments in these portions of Exodus that we've been reading is when Moshe sees an injustice, the Egyptian beating the Jew, the Israelite, and he looks everywhere and he doesn't see anybody. And thank God there are friends and allies and people around that agree with us. And there's a majority in this country, that a significant majority that is with us. So find ways of connecting, whether, you know, as a pulpit rabbi, services on Zoom or in person, whatever you can do. But whatever it is, even coming together today, I'm so glad that My Jewish Learning did this as a meeting, a Zoom meeting format, so you can see other people, and hopefully that will be a comfort.
Thank you. To all of you, thank you so much. I think on that note, we're going to wrap it up. I know that for me, this has been really profound to hear all of your thoughts, really moving. And I know it has been for the people that are here as well. Rabbi Waskow, since you opened up this session with a blessing, I was hoping you could conclude it with another blessing.
Well, Kaddish the Rabbanan begins with something very strange. Yekadav Yekadash Shemei Rabbah, the great name. For years, I couldn't figure out what that meant. Then I went to see the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, where there are about 60,000 names, and they make up one great name. And I said, oh, the great name is the name intertwined, not all separate, but intertwined of every being in the universe. So for Kaddish the Rabbanan, I would say that this week especially, the week of Shemot, right? The week of names, where the Holy One says, I used to have another name, but now you need to know. I would say, my name is just breathing. In every language, my name is just breathing. The Yud Vav with no vowels is just the breath. So here we are breathing with each other, turning it into words. May we be conscious in Kaddish the Rabbanan of the moments when we have learned from that breathing, when someone might have been a human being or might have been a new moon or a rabbit or whatever, a fish, darting, changing, a tree, a redwood, a bush, burning or not burning, is breathing, interbreathing, and that we are learning from that moment, and that we also become the teachers, the students of the teachers and the making students of our own, that we also teach, so that we carry out, we embody the Kaddish Rabbanan, not just as words, but as breath, as body, that we carry that forward for ourselves and each other, and affirm the blessing that we've been able to do that with each other this past hour or so. Been wonderful too, and wonderful, full of wonder, a real blessing.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Waskow, and thank you to our other panelists, Rabbi Isaacs, Rabbi Cohen, and Rabbi Lopatin, for being here with us in this moment.